Here we are. Oh, where'd you go? Oh, okay. She just moved. And it's 11:30, so let's get started. So, you just hide that. There I am. So, good morning. It's oh, my chat just disappeared. Not sure what happened here. Anyway, that you may see my background is different from last time. If you remember it, it's white, and so you'll see that I've changed my location physically, not just changed the house. So let me start, and you'll see my slides. Here it comes. There we are. So that's this morning. That's at, I will get out of the way. That's early this morning. Sun just sort of coming up. Rather foggy initially. This is Kingsburg, Nova Scotia. And if you don't know Nova Scotia at all, or even if you do, a lot of people haven't been down this way. Even I've been in Nova Scotia for 50 years, and I still know so little about the province. So uh, before my class was from Halifax, and I'll be moving back and forth from Halifax down to Kingsburg. I'll be here for the next 2 weeks of classes probably. That I should have retired a year or two ago, but I like what I do, and I decided to keep at it. So I ended up taking a bunch of savings, borrowing a bunch of money, and we built the cottage we wished we had 30 years ago, and built it down in Kingsburg. And Kingsburg is a location that's just along the coast past Lunenburg. It's an area that was settled back in 1750 something or other. German settlers were brought in by the British. It's because they had just thrown the French um, uh, out of Nova Scotia, sent them all down to Louisiana. And my wife's family is from here. This is where she grew up, in this area. And so for her, it was returning home. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. I'll show you pictures each day as to where I am and what the weather looks like. There are lots of nice places to see. Yeah, about an hour and a half from Halifax. But it's a gorgeous spot that we're at. So, a bit of administrative stuff to go through before we get going. So, um, we've got close to 150 registered in the course in Banner, but only 138, I think, showing up in Top Hat. So I've still got 12 I've got to get after. Oh, Dora wants to get out. Excuse me. There you go. That I've been trying to get after them to get in, and I'm not quite sure. So I've been inundating you with emails. I'm not sure what's the best way to communicate with you. But for the time being, it'll be by email from me. I'll try to put the course Management Science 1206 in the title so that you know what's coming at you. Some of you may not be receiving it, or you're getting it to a different email box. In Banner, you may have multiple email addresses. You probably all got a St. Mary's email address, but I bet you use your Gmail or Hotmail account or Yahoo or something else. So make sure in Banner you've set your email address, your preferred email, to the one you want me to send messages to. So as I said, some students, I know one student, everything bounces back. He's set his St. Mary's email as his preferred, and I think his mailbox is now full because he doesn't use it, and most students don't. Someone asked me about office hours, and that was one thing I should have mentioned last time, that I'll set up the exact schedule tomorrow afternoon, that uh, if you would send me any messages about time preferences, when you would like to be available for a Zoom type session. So I'll try to do emails during the day, through the evening, through the weekend, um, though I try to still have some of my own time in the evenings and weekends. So my response time isn't as fast. During the day, I'm pretty quick. Um, that uh, I thought Zoom would be a good medium to use for office hours. I think I can do most things through Zoom rather than use Top Hat. And through Zoom, I might be able to see your faces, at least those of you that have cameras and choose to turn them on. And so I'll just be sitting there waiting for you to check in, and that I'll be present like a regular office, and you can walk in anytime during the official office hours. If you would like to book a private appointment, and that's in the past I found most students did with a real office, send me an email. Ask, are you available at 3 o'clock on Tuesday or something? And we can set something out up. And I'll still answer a lot of email if that's the way you want to communicate. If there's an alternative way you like to communicate, let me know. Um, I don't use social media really. So it's generally email, or it'll be through Zoom. Quiz one. 7 people of those that are registered with Top Hat didn't attempt the quiz, and so I'll be reaching out to them to see what's going on. A couple appear to have grades that are too low, and as I'll mention in a minute, it was hard to get a grade under 5, and so those that had unusually low grades, and this being the case in any future quiz, get after me. I'm expecting everybody to be getting 9 and 10 out of 10. And that's what almost everybody got, and that's great. You might wonder, how do you get a 9.5? Top Hat, in their grading, um, their default is to set up part of the grade as participation, as attempting the question, and part of the grade is getting the right answer. And so I left their defaults in place there, at least, and I will probably do this for the first couple of quizzes. So just trying a question, you'll get a half point. If you get it right, then you'll get the other half a point. And so the 9.5 really reflects a student that attempted all 10 questions, but on one of them got the wrong answer. And I'll start, I haven't yet, building in more feedback on answers in that. I've got to go and work on that still as to how to do that type of thing. The discussion, initially we weren't getting replies. I had one of the settings incorrect. And so after, as that was brought to my attention, turned it on. And as of this morning, there were 56 had responded to it. Someone says you weren't able to submit it. Let me follow up afterwards, Esther, and see what we can do. There's no official grading per se on this, other than trying to track who's participating, who's not. And if you're an active participant, I may use that information. If it's a good level of participation, I don't mean right answers, I mean engagement, to replace one of your test scores, your worst test score. So I'm tracking all of the discussion that's going on and skimming through it. It was great. I was quite amazed to get so many participating. It's an amazing start. So most of you have had some exposure to data analytics through online ads popping up that because of actions you've taken online, it's triggered types of responses that are happening. And that's probably most of what we actually see. So much of other things is that you don't see. because firms are they're using it behind the scenes, like in my examples to do with credit cards, uh, uh, identifying whether or not they think my credit card transaction is valid or fraudulent. And it's used in a lot of credit scoring. A lot of the financial institutions are using it an amazing amount that we don't know about. But most of the stuff is hidden from us because the only thing we see is stuff that's visual. But it's uh, you'll get a better sense of maybe what they're doing, and have ideas of some of the things that you would work through the course. And we launched the survey on Thursday, I think it was, Wednesday or Thursday. I've got 46 responses so far. I'm going to be prodding all the people that didn't respond for the next week or so, and I'm going to annoy you with reminders. I'd like to get over 100 responses. I've got 148 from last year. And so if we combine the two, we could get a survey of, in total, 250 responses. It's not huge, but it's enough that we may be able to find some stuff that's a little bit interesting about students. Um, those that have seen the survey, a lot of it's demographic, but I ask a little bit about your finances and work and saving. That the and also some things to do with grades and fears and stress. And in the survey at the end, I ask you, uh, what's your greatest fear? So, biggest fear, they were sort of similar in different words of the responses so far, and this is valuable to me. Many are fearful of online courses. This is new for them. It's new for me. Either some are concerned about motivation and keeping going within the course, maybe motivated now, but are you still going to be motivated in October? And it's a good point. I found the same problem with online courses I've tried. Uh, Stress kept coming up in different ways people express themselves, but you could see anxiety was there, a fair bit of anxiety. Um, some were expressing an important thing about not connecting with others. That's one of my fears as well, not connecting with you. It's difficult to do in this environment. It's in part why I'd like to do office hours through Zoom so that I might be able to see someone on the other end. Not seeing people is really hard. Staying organized, that came up very, very, very frequently. How to manage your workload, that sort of thing. Um, and the output of all that type of thing is grades. That they're stressed about all these sorts of things because they're concerned about your grades. I'm concerned about your grades. Um, so we share them maybe from different perspectives, but um, it's good to hear those sorts of things. And if new things come up during the term, feel free to email me or send me a note of some sort about what I'm doing or what I could do about it. At the moment, someone said he was just disconnected. Try refreshing your screen. I'm not sure why. It still seems to be live here. Um, that I haven't gotten a message. The um, lost my train of thought. Keep trying to follow chat and do this. So, um, just a quick recap. Day one, it was just trying to explain what is data analytics, what is data mining, and emphasizing it's a process of trying to get useful information out of data. And that what I want to look at today is two things. And you've already read this, you've gotten good answers on your quiz on it. Common data mining applications, and try to explain those to you better, because some people have said um, they could answer the question, but they really didn't know what they were uncomfortable with their understanding of it, and that's to be understood. And some of it will get better as the term goes on because we'll get into more depth on some of those parts. Some it'll be maybe more superficial. The other, and this is the one I really want to emphasize, is a process for data mining. So what's going to work now? I don't know if this is, um, up and live and whether or not you can reply to it. So it's a discussion I tried inserting in my slides and just trying to get a sense if you could try typing. If you can't, we'll do it through chat. Um, that I hope you can. And why should we go through this list? Because we're only going to examine 2 applications in the course, really, to any extent. Um, why should you be exposed to a wide variety of them? And I'm not seeing anything happening. It's not showing up here. No. So, anybody getting anything? How about if I reply? I reply? I don't know. If you can't, hmm, I think we've got a problem. Can someone tell me on chat, has anyone tried using this, or is chat even working for you? You can see my reply, but you can't type. Is that it, Andy? One center. Yeah, you're good. You can see what I'm saying, but I'd like to see your thoughts. Ah, okay. Cameron at least is able to say hi. Oh, starting to get. Can I get more than hi? Any thoughts that as to why you think it's hi, hi, hi? Why we need to look at this? All I'm getting is hi. Hard to type. Okay. Fine for me. Okay, let's move on. I've got a couple other questions we'll try. I just want to try to find ways of getting you engaged in the conversation here. In class, I could pose questions and write up ideas. Your which slide am I in? Yeah, I'd like you to be able to talk to. Let's see if okay. So I've just moved ahead in my slides. I'm not sure if the discussion's still going. Um, anyway, so I'm not sure how this is going to work. I may find a different way of getting you to send me feedback on these things. That so with uh, in thinking about like what you're going to get out of the course and what we're covering within this, keep thinking about what's your role going to be once you graduate and get out there. You may it's unlikely you're going to be a data analyst, but you might. That might be exciting to get into. Um, but if your role isn't a data analyst, you're going to deal with them in the future. They're going to be more and more common. It's a very high profile job now. And you want to be able to know what to ask them that they can do for you. And so if you know what all the different there are many of the different types of things they can do for you, it's going to be useful for you to know what to ask them. Knowing a little bit more about those tasks may also give you an idea of what sort of um, whether you should believe their answers, whether you should use the results, those sorts of things. That I mentioned in last class that it was a couple of economists in the US took cell phone GPS data and used it to find out uh, what happened with the 500,000 people that were at the motorcycle rally in South Dakota and how they're going home to different places across the United States affected the outbreak of COVID in the US. And they used a particular approach in doing that. I understand there's been a flurry of activity in terms of people responding that through different media and questioning the methodology they use, the types of things, other explanations, um, having some understanding of the type of model that they might have used would give you an idea of how much faith you should put in their analysis and believing what they've got. That's one of the things, just from the perspective of someone that is just trying to consume information. As a data analyst, um, recognizing a problem gives me an idea where to start. And it gives me an idea of the best approach I could use, because other people have done those types of problems before. Different data, different situation, but it gives me insight as to where to work on this, what process to follow, and what are some of the dangers that might lie ahead of me. And so it's important to have that broad perspective of a lot of applications, even if you don't learn much about uh, each one specifically. So we've got two sorts of ones. We have some that involve making predictions. How many gigabytes of data is a customer going to use? Is a customer likely to switch service providers? So I'm predicting something about the future. And others are much more descriptive. And we'll be probably doing more on the descriptive end during the course than on the predictive, although we'll be looking at it in the context of predictive models. But trying to understand what's a profile of a typical customer. Um, and then you may make a prediction like, is this a case of fraud, by seeing, is it consistent with what's typical? And if it isn't, um, you've seen the ones, if you go on Amazon, people who bought this also bought something else. LinkedIn gets after me. Do I know someone or other? And should I add that person to my network? So they're searching for patterns that might influence my behavior or shape things. Some are looking at trying to find ways to simplify complex problems, generally ones where we have too much information. And most of us can't handle more than a very small number of things at once. I can't handle a grocery list that has more than 3 items. At least in my head, I need it all written out for me. It just gets too complicated to remember and process. When we're making comparisons of things, most of us can easily compare 2 items, but we have trouble when we get to 3 or more. It's just our ability to process information. So is there a way to simplify that in some fashion? So these are described more in the text. I'm not going to go at length into it, but I'll give some quick examples. But you look in different sources and they'll give you different lists of common applications. This one's a little bit longer than some, and many of them group them into 2 groups. And a lot of the language comes from computing science. They were the people doing this type of work first. So one group they call supervised learning, and those are generally cases where we're trying to predict something. That trying to predict what sales will look like next quarter, trying to identify, is this fraud or not fraud? Are you going to switch, not switch? Are you going to pass this course or you're not going to pass? Value estimation is trying to predict what grade you're going to get in the course. Link prediction is trying to predict, is there a linkage between 2 things? But it's looking into the future. And generally these models involve using 2 sets of data. One is knowledge about the outcome we're trying to predict, and the other is everything else that we're going to use to do the prediction. And that we need a lot of historical information about outcomes and about background. So I might, if I was predicting your grade, have final grades. That's my set of outcome stuff. And over on the other side, all kinds of other things about those students, how they did in high school, gender, where are they from, how old are they, a bunch of different things like that. And they would be used to make predictions. And we call this supervised learning because we're going to direct the model to give us the best predictions of the outcome. So in that sense, we say it's supervised. Unsupervised learning are descriptive ones where we're not saying what the outcome is going to be. And common application there is clustering. That when I did student recruitment, I did simple clustering geographically. So I'd look at the Halifax market, I'd look at the rest of the Maritimes outside of Halifax. I might look at the Caribbean as a market, China as a market, Africa, and how should we target our programs and our messaging to those different audiences. So I form clusters to make it more manageable and customized the recruitment, but I already formed the clusters. They weren't formed by the students themselves or the applicants themselves. An alternate way would be to take all kinds of data about the individuals, maybe their geographical location, but understanding their interests, their age, um, anything I've got about them, and seeing if they naturally fall into certain groups. And that identifying these groups and let the data tell me what the grouping should be instead of me telling the data how I want to group them. And it may be that I'd like to split my students into 4 clusters, 4 different groups, but can you describe what are the characteristics of those 4 sorts of groups? Um, Other sorts of things like co-occurrence grouping, those people that bought one item typically bought a different or another item together. Your strawberries and whipped cream if you're in Nova Scotia in the summer. That profiling where you're really just trying to build a descriptive model of what a certain type of customer looks like. Some of them are ones where I'm just trying to reduce the amount of data, the number of variables and that sort of thing that I need to work with, and shrink it down and not lose information. Or maybe I can come up with identifying what are the variables, what are the drivers that cause someone to switch cell phone plans. And so I know what should I focus my attention on changing their behavior. What are the most influential things? I'm not making a prediction, but I'm trying to find out what are the levers that I've got for changing their behavior. That so when you're facing a new problem, it's often easier to get started if you've got a sense of what type of problem it is. And like Target started out, which of our customers is pregnant? That sounds like a classification problem. I'm going to classify customers as pregnant or not pregnant. And so I'll look at what are typical ways of starting out doing a classification problem. And when you're given a problem to solve, how do you start solving the problem? Yeah. So I don't know if this is going to work again. So it didn't last time. So try typing something um, that how everyone talks about problem solving. All kinds of professors say they teach problem solving. I don't think most of them do. What do you think problem solving really is? If you can't get it to go there, try typing it in the chat until we figure things out. Solving a problem. Yeah, but what does that mean? And how do you do it? How do you solve problems? Any other thoughts? Brainstorming, that's a good way in terms of starting it. Break it down to smaller pieces. Good, exactly. Critical thinking is another one of those vague ones. I don't know what it means. Um, I got to identify the problem and determining best course of action, bring it into easier ones. Very good. Any other sorts of thoughts? Getting at root cause, and even that's a challenge. There are a lot of neat approaches for doing that sort of thing. Finding a solution. Solution's probably going to come at the end, but it's just how do we find it? Anyway, those are good things that generally what you're giving me. A lot of professors think problem solving, like in quants, you were taught problem solving is how to find the present value of an annuity or how to find a break-even point, how to solve a linear programming problem. Yeah, that's not problem solving. That's using a tool. Um, Tools aren't problems. So you may have, it's useful to know how to use tools, but how do you organize those skills and that sort of thing that you've got to be able to go through and find it? It's um, we aren't good at teaching you frameworks, and you should have a set of standard frameworks. Uh, so often students would come in to see me with a question on their assignment, and they're saying, I can't do it because I don't know where to start. And that's probably the most important thing for so many students, for so many people, is trying to figure out, where do I begin? And then what do I do next? And do one piece at a time. Like some of you said, break it into smaller pieces. But what's the first piece you should look at? So those are critical parts of it, but we need to think about how to solve problems. And I don't think we do a good job. So as I said, I'm um, I find it interesting that very few people talk about problem finding. If you want to do better, you want to improve, if you're interested in continuous improvement and that type of thing, it means you've got to be able to find opportunities for improvement. What's your process for finding them? So finding it, then getting it into defining it, and then getting into problem solving. So uh, I'm going to emphasize the process a lot in the course. And we're going to use what's a common framework that's used in data mining. And it's probably one of the most popular one, but there's several others, and they're all very, very similar. This isn't rocket science, but it's thinking about it and having uh, uh, an idea of what should be your first step, and then when you feel you've done it, what should be your second step, and so on. That so the CRISP model, it's technical jargon, it's cross-industry standard process for data mining. That doesn't tell me very much. And why do we keep the R from cross instead of just saying KISP? I don't know. Um, but this is what it is, and this is what's out there. And it's very, very popular approach. And you can see from the diagram that there's 6 phases to this, from business understanding through to ending with deployment. And many people would, in fact, go and um, move through from deployment back to business understanding and go for full circle. I tend to think of problem solving as never ending. It's a constant wheel that you're working around. But you'll notice in this one, there's a whole bunch of back arrows. And it's because frequently as we get deeper into the problem, we realize we define the problem incorrectly, or we've got the wrong data, or we've organized the data incorrectly to use the tool we want, or we evaluate it and the results are unsatisfactory and we may have to go back and change what we're looking for. And so it's not a simple linear process at all. And never feel, there are many people that refuse to go back. They say they'll never get the job done because they keep going back and changing things. And that's true. You've got to be careful about it. In project management, managing large projects, whether it be construction projects or IT projects, whatever. Uh, we hate things that we call change orders, that changing your mind partway through, or redoing things. In a construction project, contractors love changes because they've given you a price. And then when you go and change your plans, they say, oh, yeah, we can do that, but it's going to cost you. We're not going to give you all the money back for what you initially asked for. We'll just give you part of it. And then we're going to charge you a huge amount of money for your change for those sorts of things. Uh, so it's very easy for a home reno project to double in cost easily by changing your mind as you go. You've got to be very careful about how you plan those. And you may have to come up with a planning framework that allows for changes to be done more easily and cheaply. It may cost overall more to have that flexibility, at least at the outset, but you may find at the end that it was good insurance to have flexibility in construction. That in building my cottage, that my contractor last summer, I want to know, did he want plans in huge detail? And he said, no, you're going to change your mind. Uh, that So we built it in phases, and we'd stop and reevaluate and say, do we want to keep going down the path we're going, or do we want to change our plan? Because at this stage, it's going to be expensive if we have to go back and make revisions. And it worked out incredibly well. So, as I said, it's broken down into stages. The stages are not independent. They influence each other. Um, and some analysts, they'll combine parts. I tend to combine, if I can put it back there, the data understanding and data preparation. Um, I have difficulty separating the two, and I tend to do both of those at the same time. But others will break it up into more pieces, and some separate them more, or combine them. So what do they mean? And you should have a reasonable understanding. These are described in a bit more detail in the text. But in business understanding, I'm asking, why are you doing this? What does success look like? When we're all finished, what's it going to look like? You're really focused on outcomes. Don't worry at this stage how you're going to do it. Don't worry about constraints that are on you, that type of thing. Start out thinking first, what are you trying to achieve? If you did Quant 1 previously, and some of you did, some didn't, when doing a linear programming problem, first step is always identifying the objective. What is it that you're trying to achieve? Don't worry about constraints. Don't worry about variables. That think most about what's your objective, and then try to dream about, okay, you've achieved your objective, and think about what it really looks like and how you're going to use that. Very often, when you tell people the answer, and then you say, well, how are you going to use that information or that knowledge? They then realize they don't know, because there they've got to think about how they're going to do implementation, who's going to do it. Audio is echoing. Okay. Move my mic around. Yep. Whoops. Sorry. Dora wanted to get out again. That there are lots of things to think through at this early stage, and all too often we're more interested in getting to work and getting busy, and we don't think through this one enough. And I can think of uh, one instance of a project. It was quite expensive. $300,000 was spent. Um, they completed it, but it ended up being useless because they never really thought, what does success look like? Who was going to use it? How would they use it? Um, and it ended up they developed a product that nobody used. That think carefully on this business understanding and defining what it is, and trying to think as well about how do you start rephrasing that as a data problem. That uh, then you're going to start getting into the data analysis. Where does data analysis come in terms of solving this problem? So I was going to do that, but I'm not going to, because I don't think the chat is working all that well. And let's try to not run the class too late, but give it some thought about what was their business problem and what was their data analytics problem. They sound similar, but they're phrased a little bit differently. The business problem is what the marketing people were thinking about. The data analytics problem is what the statisticians felt they had to do. And they're interconnected, but they're different. They're slightly different. But we've got to think through those carefully. Um, and very often this step is raced through, and it's not done well. So in Target's case, it was the marketing people saying, well, if I knew which customers were pregnant when the baby is due, I can send them appropriate promotions, better engage them, and they were thinking about how they're going to interact with their customers. The data analyst is trying to think, can we determine who is pregnant and when the baby is due? And it's just um, it's doing the analysis as opposed to the business is more thinking in terms of how are they going to use the results. They're thinking in terms of the end result, the end deliverable, and how they're going to use it. But you should be, if you were a data analyst, you would be talking with the client a lot to get them to really think through how they're going to use the outcome. That um, they again, we've got a lot of static. I'm sorry about that. Um, it's quiet here. Um, in data understanding is again one I got to think about quite carefully, and sometimes we don't think long enough about it or broadly enough. Someone in problem solving mentioned brainstorming. Do brainstorming with your data, with where can you get it? What do I have? What might I need? How could I get it? That sometimes we limit ourselves starting out and we don't think about other sorts of sources or get after people and ask them about where could I find certain types of information. I've been quite amazed in terms of how much information is out there. I just wouldn't have thought to ask, or I wouldn't think that anybody collects it, but they do. So they, what does that data look like? This is what we'll be starting looking at seriously on Wednesday, and um, talking about it abstractly and actually seeing it live are somewhat different. And I want you to start looking at the quality of the data, and that's something you'll see me hammering about over and over again. Um, and you'll be looking at all. Yeah, I'll show you some data we won't be analyzing, but you can see all kinds of strange patterns in it and some unusual stuff in it. These are coming from what I would hope would be reliable government sources, um, but it's stuff that we shouldn't be seeing all these sorts of patterns and anomalies in. Until you think about how was that data obtained and how is it processed, you realize that there are serious data quality problems, and you should be careful about uh, the nature of decisions you make based upon that data. So again, where would Target get its data? And in their instances, they've got tens of customer data. I'm sure they'd love to know about women that are pregnant that don't shop at Target. That would be data that would be lovely to have. Unfortunately, they can't get it. Um, in student recruitment, I wanted to recruit the students that went to Dalhousie or Acadia or St. FX or Mount St. Vincent, other institutions in our region. But the only ones that I knew about were ones that also applied to St. Mary's. If they didn't apply to us, I didn't know anything about them. And so trying to increase my target pool of students, I first needed them to apply, and I didn't know who they were. So that's data I couldn't get access to. Whereas if I was an American university and I wanted to recruit American students, in the United States, all students are expected normally to write one of their standardized tests. Almost every university in the United States makes admission decisions based upon the SAT or the ACT tests. There's a lot of debate about those tests and issues with it, but as soon as the student writes the test, that data is available that you can buy. And so if I wanted to target students in a particular high school with a certain level of academic performance, I could purchase that list of ones that fit my need. Yeah, we can purchase customer data, and there is a lot out there. When you subscribe to things, when you join an organization, when you uh, with any store, any website that you give your personal information to so that they can target you, they can then turn around and resell that list to others. Um, in Target's case, they're looking for uh, collecting a lot of data about who are women that are likely to be pregnant. And uh, they wouldn't be able to get access to that data um, from others. That would be something that would be hard to purchase. But there is a lot of other stuff that they do, and they can do direct marketing. Well, in Canada, they can't. um, in Canada, we have an anti-spam law, and they cannot do target marketing to you unless you formed a business relationship with them. And so even if I could identify students that are high school students, if I could get a list of all of the graduating class from high school, I can't send them information because at the moment it's illegal in Canada. It violates our anti-spam law. Um, Again, having done the sales, at least in an educational environment, um, I had my challenges in terms of how do I get new data. And the only data I could really work with were students that had at least applied to St. Mary's. And then I could study them, but it's studying the students that never came. Why didn't they, or why didn't they ever apply? It's challenging, but you've got to think about it because sometimes you'll pose a question and you can't get the data you need. But you've got to think through this sort of thing. That, but um, and yeah, we can study purchase records, and if they've given you information, then once you've given them information about you, you've formed a business relationship. And so in Canada, they can continue to target you and push things out to you, but you've got to have clicked "I agree" or whatever to be able to do it. And they're required to take you off their list if you say unsubscribed or take me off your list or that type of thing. It varies by country, and I know there are many students in the class that are from many different countries, and the environment is different in terms of what information we're allowed to collect, what we're not allowed to collect, and of the stuff that we've got, how we're allowed to use it, and make sure you're aware of those sorts of things. Um, in Canada, there's a whole range of privacy laws that we have to abide by, and the same would apply in other countries. That Let's move on a little bit. I'll talk more on data as we go through. You'll start seeing some of these sorts of things. So Target did have a pool of data that they could use to go and start analyzing this sort of stuff. But data preparation is a phase so I got all of this stuff, but now I've got to be able to clean it and use it. And this is really awful work. It's slow, painful. You don't feel like you're making a lot of progress. It may use up 80% of your time on the project. It's just going through this process of trying to find which data you need to extract from your database because you've probably got way too much. You're going to find in the data stuff that's wrong, stuff we'll call outliers. And you've got to know, is this really an outlier or not an outlier? And some that you And what do you mean by an outlier? An outlier is something that's unusual. It doesn't fit with all the rest. It may be correct data, but it's very unusual. Many instances, it's incorrect data. Uh, but frequently we need to, I'm saying clean it out, but we also need to investigate and see, is there a story behind that? The um, And in many instances, I'd be transforming, recoding, relabeling. I'll construct data. I'll construct new things out. I could have all of the data on your individual grades, but from that I'll transform it by calculating a grade point average. Or I may decide, well, I want to drop out courses that are not applicable to your degree program. And so I'll transform it again. Maybe I only want the average in courses in your major. Um, so I may be recoding or transforming it in quite a variety of different sorts of ways. Think about how you're going to use it. Think about, is it all relevant or not relevant? What you should include, not include. Frequently, we're doing a lot of filtering, and we'll be spending some time doing those sorts of things, trying to explore patterns. And so when I'm going through this, I'm doing an awful lot of data exploration. I'm not modeling my data exactly. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm doing a lot of exploration to try to decide what path I should follow to examine it. And this is a very valuable phase. It's one, don't rush through. Um, if you were doing a statistics course, they generally start you out at after that fact into the modeling phase, which comes next. So just think of targets data, all of those individual purchase transactions, there are tons of them. There's huge amounts for some customers that are there frequently, and then for some customers that are very infrequent. Do we care what type of body lotion they use, which brand it is, which bottle size it is? Uh, could we group it together? But then maybe we want to know, do they buy it in small bottles or big bottles? Um, we'd probably want to just summarize things. Uh, is it purchases per month? Is it the amount that you buy per month? Is it per week? Is it how much you've ever bought? When was the last time you bought any? That of the same type of product, you could imagine many, many different ways of looking at it. Are you buying the premium brand? Are you buying the store brand? Uh, that um, there's too much data. How do you find a way of distilling that down to something manageable? That very often what we get into is modeling as being the first thing. You did that in your Quant 1 course when you did linear programming. Um, you had all the data that went into those models that already defined what the problem was, the restrictions, that type of thing, and jumped right into modeling. If you do most statistics courses, you're right into doing the formulas and the analysis. Um, modeling is, from a mathematical perspective, may be fun to do, at least for people that like math. Um, but there's so much preparatory work that has to be done before we get there. And it may be that we don't use just one tool. We might use several models, several tools, um, that we may use multiple approaches to give the same, to predict the same thing. Uh, I forgot to mention, I don't know if anyone is on the line from Bermuda, the hurricane, um, which one? Paulette should be pounding you right now, or it came through just a few hours ago. It was category 1, I think, when it was hitting Bermuda, and it's turning over to a category 2. That um, right now there are 5 tropical storms that we're watching in the North Atlantic. It's been a very, very busy season. And if you go on to some of the sites, I go on to the Weather Underground, you can look at their computer models. And currently they're only showing about 4 different models. It used to be they showed 12 or 15 different projections, but they'd give you, depending upon the assumptions you're making, what the outcome was going to be and what the prediction looked like. And so sometimes with modeling, we don't use one technique. We try multiple approaches to get a sense of, if we made different assumptions or handled the data in different ways, what would the outcome look like? Um, if you are interested in modeling on the coronavirus, the website, I think I mentioned it in the notes in the chapter. There's a website called 538, written out as words altogether, 538.com. Good website for tracking things in U.S. politics and U.S. sports. Um, but they were tracking about 15 to 20 different models to predict how many deaths there would be in the US due to the COVID virus. And they continuously are updating those models to see what they think the future is going to hold. and they give you explanations behind each model as to assumptions or the type of methodology they're using. And they come up with different forecasts. They're similar but different. Some are much more pessimistic than others. But, um, but this is where we get into those data mining applications and the types of models they will use. And the outputs of models may vary quite widely. So there are many phases. We're going to be doing modeling a fair bit for value estimation and for classification. So Target ended up building models, we don't know how, that identified 25 products. So they did a first stage of identifying who are the key things to look at, and then built a model that took data on those 25 products and estimate a probability that the customer was pregnant. And they built another model that said among those that they thought were pregnant, if they're pregnant, what would be the due date? And they got quite good at both. Um, so it was both a classification model and a value estimation model. They also had models uh, to for different types of customers, how best to engage them, what they're most likely to react to. But we got to remember all models make mistakes. There's a big margin for error with many of them. The predictions are not exact. We will misclassify things. We'll make mistakes, as TD Bank did with my credit card. Um, and one of the things that we're going to have to look at in evaluation is what are appropriate performance measures? What is good performance? What's bad performance? If we make an error in our prediction, what happens? Is it a big consequence, a small consequence? How will we measure success? Evaluation is a critical phase. It's just not having an answer, but knowing, understanding the quality of that answer. And again, with Target, they were able to um, make a very good predictions, at least so they claimed, in terms of being able to identify who was pregnant and what their delivery date was. And deployment's our final phase, and um, we often don't talk about implementation, but looking back, did we actually answer the question that was posed? And sometimes we haven't. We thought we did, but now we understand things better and we have to go back to the beginning again. And because we didn't answer we have some cases where the model is not understood by the user, so they refuse to use it. That's been the case with COVID, with many jurisdictions, at least in the US, that the decision makers don't understand how public health is making predictions. And so they're ignoring it and making political decisions. And you've got to be careful about these sorts of things. Some models are very difficult to maintain. That it's you're not using it for one decision, you're going to be making decisions constantly. And so how do you update it and do those things? A number of them have real ethical issues. Are we invading privacy? Is it appropriate what we're doing? And the that became debate in terms of now I can't think of the firm. I'm having a memory blip, but to do with the last U.S. election and preparation for it, and elections in other jurisdictions as well, in terms of how data was being used to potentially influence voters. And there's a lot of debate about those sorts of things. And some have had unintended consequences. Be careful. You've got to think through that. And at times we may need to rephrase things and repeat the process. Maybe we know more now and we should go back to the start and redo the problem because we have new insights that we had previously. So Target, that they knew different ways that they could influence various customers, and they were thinking through in deployment how they were going to use the data that they had. And it's important to know that and know, is that appropriate or not appropriate? But it's thinking through that active implementation phase that you're getting yourself into. As I said, Target used a lot of models. It was successful in the sense that it identified tens of thousands of prospects that they wouldn't have been able to identify otherwise. So it was of enormous value. If it had only identified 1,000 customers accurately, it probably wouldn't have been worth their while. But to identify tens of thousands, then that would be a big, big success. That, um, but they uncovered ethical issues. Um, the success of it actually gave credibility to the analytics team, so they got more work. It built confidence in them. And depending upon how you handle it, I've seen projects, not necessarily data analytics projects, but other projects, when mishandled, those that were involved end up losing credibility, and so they have difficulty arguing in terms of future initiatives that they have. It's important to do that, and deployment's critical on that. The last phase of the course, I'll be looking at how to write reports, how to present your data, how to do charts well. That you may have learned all kinds of things about how to do bar charts and pie charts and other types of charts. Um, but knowing how to do it and knowing how to do it wisely are two very, very different things. And most people do a very awful job with charting, um, except for those that do it as part of their daily job. Those ones have learned what works, what doesn't. But those that do it infrequently often make big mistakes. And most textbooks give you very poor advice on how to use or where to use things and in what fashion. So I'm at the end. Good. I'm trying to keep this to an hour. Um, Data mining is a process. It's not a tool. It's not a formula. Think of it as a process. And it starts with, where do we begin? It gives you a very loose roadmap as to how to go through and do it. It may give you a lot of questions to ask yourself at each phase, and they will help guide you through those different ones. And be careful about um, thinking you're finished when you're not. It's only if it's actively implemented that you know that you've actually done the job. Uh, I'm a very visual person. I like to have pictures in my head or stories in my head. And so it helps guide me how I do problems by trying to imagine similar types of problems, similar types of situations, uh, and those guide me in terms of. And I think we all learn by example, but try to think broadly in terms of examples, of analogies, of things that exhibit similar characteristics that you realize, no, it's not the same, but is there knowledge that can be gained from that and help guide you in terms of next steps you should be following? So next class, um, it'll be Word class. I'm not, the one on Wednesday, a lot of jargon and language and that type of thing. I might start into Excel by the end of next class. If not, Excel will uh, jump into it next Monday. That we're going to jump over the business understanding. It's very much context specific. I may try to give you examples as we go through the term uh, of what data fits with what business problem or issues that you may run into. But uh, that it's hard to give you uh, tools and techniques for getting through the business understanding stage. But if you've defined your problem, how do we get into at least get started on data understanding? One that gives you a little bit idea on the process and uses very little in the way of fancy tools does look at, where do you get the data from? And um, uh, I looked at just because I found it amusing. Uh, and it's a blog that was written a number of years ago about Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, the wife of Bill Clinton, former president of the U.S. Hillary Clinton ran against Donald Trump for president in 2016. And it was interesting as regardless of your feelings about Donald Trump, that there are lots of people that hate him, but it turned out there were more people, or at least um, uh, it was a close match between the dislike for Donald Trump and the dislike for Hillary Clinton. Um, that um, it it uh, it was more people voting for each of the parties was because they wanted to vote against the leader of the other party. Neither leader was especially well liked across the country, at least by the majority of Americans. And it seems interesting why um, Clinton, who is seen to be incredibly intelligent, knowledgeable, and so on, um, should be very capable, but is so disliked by the American population. And it goes back quite a few years in terms of their dislike for her. Uh, but this blog was written by a woman whose first name is Hillary, and she always felt tarred by the name um, because of the way people would joke about it. And she does data analysis, so she uh, looked at that and said, is it, as she called it, the most poisoned name in U.S. history? And how would you go and address that question? How would you answer it? And how would you prove it was not just an unpopular name at certain times, but could have that label most poisoned? And so the process is interesting to see how she walked through it and communicated the information at the end. Um, and it's interesting to see what you could do without any fancy mathematics. Take a look at it. It's not that long to read. You take care. I'm going to sign off now, and you will see me on Wednesday. Take care. Bye.